Hi, I'm Larry Madvyad, CEO of ConnectSafely, the U.S. host of Safer Internet Day. And I'm speaking today with Noopur Davis, who is the Executive Vice President and Chief Product and Information Security Officer for Comcast. And as everyone knows, Comcast is a major cable provider. You may or may not live in its market, but chances are pretty good you do, since it penetrates much of the nation. Noopur, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Larry. And just a quick correction, not just cable, but broadband.
Yes.
We provide broadband to a very large segment of the country.
Well, that is absolutely true. And I meant to say that I think of broadband coming through a cable, but either way, it is how I get not only my television, but my internet, which means even much of my television, since a lot of my internet these days is coming through Roku's and other over-the-top devices. And we'll talk a little bit about that because we have so many devices in our homes today, besides just computers and phones and other devices with screens. But I want to talk a little bit about the cyber health report that Xfinity very recently published, which had what for me was, I wouldn't call it shocking, but interesting findings. And maybe they were kind of shocking, but not surprising, about the threats that are out there and how little many of us know about those threats.
Yes, indeed. I mean, when I looked at the numbers, and I live in this field, so nothing shocks me anymore. But I think that the kind of big surprise for me was the disconnect between perception and reality. The cool thing about this report is that it has empirical data and it also has survey data. So when we looked at the survey data and asked people, what do you think? And the general response was, well, I'm probably attacked about a dozen times a month, right? About 12 times a month. But then when we looked at our empirical data, over a period of 10 months, over about 20 million subscribers, we saw that that average was really 104 times a month that our product, X5 Advanced Security, actually blocked security threats. So that discrepancy between a perception of 12, reality of 104, almost an order of magnitude difference, that was surprising.
Right. And also it's amazing the extent to which our devices are growing in our homes. Again, I mentioned it's not just your PC anymore. We have numerous, not everyone, but many people have numerous devices. In my case, I've got doorbells and cameras and security systems and a thermostat and just so many things that could potentially be attacked or be vectors of other attacks. So talk a little bit about how the world has changed from the days when we all had devices with screens and disk drives and we could either download or maybe put a disk in and add a security software. As far as I know, there's nowhere on my doorbell for me to put a Norton antivirus disk or any other security thing. I either have to do that through an app or possibly not even that, maybe just take advantage of your security tools that you offer.
Yes, no, that's a really good point. You mentioned a whole bunch of devices, but the type and the list keeps growing. So there are, the voice assistants, there are refrigerators and washing machines, and like everything is becoming toasters, right? Everything is becoming internet connected, and anything with an IP address that is connected to an IP address outside your home is a potential vector for attack. So the biggest thing that people tend to do, and we saw this in the report, is that if it doesn't have a screen and you're not like interacting with it personally, like you do with a laptop, for example, these devices tend to become invisible. They kind of fade into the background. But what people don't realize is that they're still connected. They are still, so anytime anything is connected to the internet, it's a vector.
Well, would you explain that for me? So in other words, I'm not particularly worried about my toaster being hacked. I mean, I guess I could have my toast burned, but why should I be worried about my toaster being hacked?
Well, your toaster now is on the same network that the other devices are on, right, inside your home. So I'm not saying that your toaster might have that vector, but some devices do. So what happens is that the bad guy would come into the toaster, and from the toaster, they would then start trying to do, lateral movement. And if the toaster isn't designed properly, then that will be allowed. And then your other devices that you do care more about would be in harm's way.
Most of our viewers would understand that they need to protect their laptop and perhaps their mobile phone. And they understand, I would hope at this point, and maybe not, but it's good to remind them things like keep your operating systems up to date, your other software, use anti-malware protection when you can, things of that nature. But every one of us has in our home, whether we're a Comcast customer or anybody else, some kind of a gateway to the internet. It may be a modem and a router. It may be a gateway from our internet service provider, but somewhere in our home is a box, or two boxes in some cases, or more, because you could have remote a mesh network where you have devices throughout the house, which are the gateway to the internet. So talk a little bit about the importance of those. So at the very least, making sure that their password. Back in the old days, every router, at least from the major manufacturers, would come with a password and username of admin. And so it was a piece of cake for hackers to break into your router. Now, at least, I think that's kind of getting fixed. But still, there is a password and there is a username, and we need to be aware of the risk associated just with that alone.
Absolutely. So, the kind of things that we do for our customers who have our gateways, and that's about 20 million customers, is, we provide XY Advanced Security. And what XY Advanced Security does is it's an artificial intelligence platform, and it is powered by our partnership with Cujo AI. That's the company that we work with. And what our AI platform does is that it detects and then blocks any harmful activity on any device in your home that is connected to that gateway. So, and it does this automatically. There's an app, you can just look at our, by the way, as soon as you open your XY app, or your Xfinity account, you're connected to this. You don't even have to enroll. And it does other things like, auto update of software, or firmware. So those are the things that I think if you don't own something from us, and, I will, nobody, by the way, is ever 100% protected, right? But I'm proud of what we do for our customers. And so I think if you're not using our protection, then, these are the type of things you should do, right? Make sure that you're using a device that is auto updated, that is password protected, and, call your ISP, ask them, your internet service provider, ask them, how are you protecting the gateway? How are you protecting me, right? How are you protecting my devices? But those basic things like auto update on, make sure that the firmware is getting patched and updated automatically, that you do have strong passwords. All of those things still apply.
I'm glad you mentioned it. I happen to be a Comcast customer, but instead of renting a gateway from you, I own my own modem and own my own router. And it just occurred to me after talking to you, I should look into my routers, because my router actually comes with a product that provides protection. I've never subscribed to it, so maybe I'll think about that. But that is one advantage of having a router from or I should say a gateway. And just to distinguish, a gateway is, correct me if I'm wrong, is a one box that serves the function of both a modem to bring the cable internet into your home and a router which distributes that signal to the devices in your home. Do I have that right?
You got that exactly right. Yes.
If you have a gateway provided by your internet service provider, and many people do, it is obviously the easiest way to go ahead and get internet. Then you need to make sure you're in touch with your ISP to see what services they offer.
Exactly. And just follow those basic hygiene rules, right? If there's auto updates are configurable, turn them on. If make sure that you have strong passwords, that you've protected your device as much as you can.
You mentioned something that's kind of interesting about the different perception versus reality. And it's actually the opposite when it comes to crime in general. People tend to have this perception that there is more crime than there actually is. I mean, any crime is bad, but when you ask people about it, they tend to overestimate the amount of crime in the country or their community. It seems like it's exactly the opposite when it comes to internet crime, that we tend to think things aren't as bad. When I look at your report, I mean, I really was, oh my gosh, this is much worse than I ever imagined it to be.
Yes, I mean, one of the stats that, again, I live this, but it still kind of is eye-opening every time I see it, is we had, 6 billion malware that we blocked in the first 10 months of 2020, right? Through the XY Advanced Security product. So, but your question is a really interesting one, and I wonder what the psychology behind it may be. I think it's two things. One is a lot of our IoT devices really do fade into the background. And, I forget that, I may have a listening assistant turned on. I may forget that, that thermostat is connected to the internet, because, it's just in the background, just doing its thing. So I think that's one reason, out of sight is out of mind.
No, that's a really good point. In fact, every once in a while, my router actually gives me a report of what's connected. And oftentimes they have obscure names. In other words, they're named, it doesn't say the company that I bought it from. It may say the company that developed it, which could be some obscure company in China that I've never heard of. And so I actually have things on my network that I think I put there, but I really don't know for sure.
That's a great point. So that's one of the features in the X5 Advanced Security product. It actually gives you, it is AI based, right? So it actually discovers the type of device. So it will actually go that one step more and say, it's not just some weird, long, random identifier, but it will actually go ahead and say thermostat, or right. So it tries to do that, and it does a pretty good job with the better known devices, right?
And why that's very important is with a good Wi-Fi network like the one I have with a lot of nodes around the house, I'm broadcasting beyond my own walls. I mean, my neighbor, if somebody parked out in front of my house, could very well get access to my Wi-Fi if they knew how to get in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why you have to just know who's connected to your network, for sure.
Another kind of scary statistic that came out of the report is that 85% of people think they're doing the right thing, yet 64% admitted to behaviors that are dangerous. And of course, there's probably a lot more people that aren't even aware of the fact that they're doing behaviors which could be dangerous. So there's as you said, this disconnect. It's not just people think it's safer, they actually think they're doing everything that they should be doing, but they're not.
Yes, I mean, a really good example is, people would say, yes, we're doing things well, we think we're doing the right behavior. And then they would answer the next question, which would be like, do you share your passwords? And the answer would be yes, right? So just that contradiction. And I think that is really a challenge for all of us in the security community. I think security is still too hard. And people then try to take the easy way out, and somehow we've got to make the secure way also the easy way. And I think we're all still struggling. I think things like X5 are getting us closer to that, make the right thing to do, the easy thing to do, but we're not quite there yet.
But even X5 can't protect you from having too weak a password.
No.
Or using the same password on every site you go to. And the problem is as bad of a habit as it is using the same password on multiple sites, and there's a really good reason not to do it, it's really hard to remember dozens of passwords. And, should you write them? Well, for example, some people say never write them down. I actually feel comfortable writing them down and putting it. Now, I don't post it on my front door. It's put somewhere where I can find it, because I'm much more worried about a hacker in Estonia than I am somebody breaking into my house, rummaging through my drawers and finding my list of passwords.
Absolutely. So, I use, the good news is now that, a lot of browsers and a lot of operating systems are supporting complex passwords and password managers, right? So, so I personally do that. I don't write them down. I count on, I use the generated complex passwords, and then I use the password managers to store them. Right. Now, the one, weak point in that scheme is the password of the password manager.
Exactly.
Right? So that's the only thing that I have to make sure that it is long and that I remember it.
Exactly.
Right? I don't write it down, but everything else is.
I won't tell you the phrase, but I have phrases that are meaningful.
Phrases are the right thing to do. Yeah. So, a superbly complex 8-character password that you have to write down because it's so complex that you don't remember it, versus a 12-character phrase. The 12-character phrase is much more secure than that 8-character complex.
So do you believe in an actual phrase like, my dog's name is Fluffy, versus one of the ones that I have, and I won't give you a real one, is I take a phrase like, I met Sally at Lincoln High School in 1984, and I would use the first letter of each word. I would capitalize the proper nouns. Is that, and it's usually about 12 characters or longer. Is that a reasonable way to go?
Yes, absolutely. The latter, but not the, so if you pick a phrase, phrases are fine. Random words are fine. So,
Yes.
just put word 1, 2, 3, and 4, but that you'll remember. But, a common phrase is not. So
Right. My dog Fluffy would not be a
yes,
good example.
exactly.
Yeah, it's words that have no connection to each other, which is why I use a real phrase that I can remember, but I only use the first letter of each word, and I change it up periodically. And I don't use the same phrase for every, in case any hackers are listening, I don't use the same phrase for every site I go to. I have different phrases depending.
That's superb. You're doing just the right thing. The only other thing I would add to that is, passwords are a pain. So any site that offers multi-factor authentication, just turn that on, because
Absolutely.
it's just so easy these days. You can click and it'll read your thumbprint, or recognize your voice or your face, and you're in. And that is very hard to hack.
Or it'll send you a text message, which isn't 100% secure, but at least it's one more layer. And just to make you relax, most of them will only do it when somebody signs in on a new device. So it doesn't mean you have to, every time you log into Facebook, you have to do this. But if you were to log into Facebook on a new device or a new browser, you would do it, which protects you against a lot of attackers. So.
Absolutely. And Comcast, again, we support multi-factor authentication for our customers. It's very easy to turn on. It's just another layer of protection that you have.
So let's talk about some other issues that are risks. I know Comcast has parental control tools. I wonder if you could talk to a little bit about how you do protect people on your network, and the difference between a gateway level parental control and a device level one is, I believe you can protect kids whether they're online through any Wi-Fi device in the house. Like it could be a phone, it could be a computer. Is that right?
That is correct. So, and that is where, like you said, the power of the gateway, because, all Wi-Fi connections will go through that. So, we have all kinds of names for this, right? How to find your kids. Put a parental control on that says at 6 o'clock, right, at dinner time, the Wi-Fi will be off for a while. Or,
that's one way to get them to come to dinner. Yeah,
exactly. That's one way to come to dinner, right? So yes, we take that really seriously, and I know that that's one of your missions of your organization. But it is really, really important that our kids are protected, and it's because they're not old enough and wise enough yet to make the right decisions. So you just have to put some guardrails around, where they go and what they do. And that is what parental controls allows you to do, is, things like time, things like type of sites that, you allow them to go to and you don't. And then of course, a specific area where you don't want them to go, or, where you do want them to go. So it does all of that parents love it, kids maybe not so much.
Well, I think what's important, what we always say is, if you're going to use any form of parental control or any form of monitoring device, always have a conversation with your child, explain why it's there. And if it's a situation where, for example, web surfing, as they mature, you might want to loosen up on the controls. I mean, if they're 17 years old and about to leave the house for college or military or a job, you want to get them trained to be self-reliant. And that's a time when, and maybe prior to that, when you need to think about loosening up on those controls. So it's not a one-size-all situation. We're just about out of time, but I think it would be remiss to talk about Comcast without talking about Internet Essentials, only because there are many people out there, perhaps watching, perhaps not, perhaps somebody who's struggling financially, who may fit into one of the categories that's eligible for internet for less than $10 a month.
Our Internet Essentials program was launched in 2011, so almost 10 years ago. And its whole purpose is, to address digital equity. And the program has grown to become our country's largest and most successful program. So today we have, actually since the program's inception, we now have 8 million low-income people who connect to the internet using our broadband services for $10 a month. And more than 90% of these people, of the 8 million, did not have broadband and internet connectivity before they signed up. So it's really important to them that that this service was available to them. And what we've also done is we heavily subsidize almost 150,000 devices for this group of people. And we've also invested about $700 million in like overall digital skills training for our Internet Essential community.
And I would urge anybody who lives in a Comcast market who knows somebody who might be eligible to call 800 Comcast to see if they're eligible and sign up, or go on their website. And if you don't live in a Comcast area, other internet service providers are. This is the one area where I think it's great to be copied. But
Yes,
I know AT&T
yes.
and other ISPs are copying you, and I think that's terrific. So do check with your ISP. This has been incredibly interesting and informative. I really appreciate your taking the time. Noopur Davis from Comcast, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Larry.